And then we can get started throwing our big bowl, right? So first things first, I'm gonna round out. Ooh, can you guys see how like when I smacked it down, there's all this like hollow space here? That's usually where air would get trapped, which would mess you up the whole time. So I'm gonna try to smack this into a roughly round shape. And then we're gonna do this thing. That way it's sort of a top shape on the bottom. Top shape on the bottom. It's pointy. Pointy is the point. From there, we're gonna smack some. And that just like helps it get a little more in the corner. I probably could have like muscled it like that, but that seems like a lot of muscle that I don't want to use. Get this all situated. I am gonna start by spider hands over the top. Trying to just get it a little closer. If you're using this much clay, I straight up recommend that when you're on your sit down wheel, stand up, wedge into yourself, and then just like lean your whole body in on it. All right, my wheel's going max speed. I'm gonna start coning because I didn't wedge this, which I usually only wedge stuff if I take multiple pieces and I add them together, then you need to wedge, right? Or if I'm using like porcelain, which has to be activated before you throw with it. But this process does almost the same thing as wedging, where you're kind of like realigning all your particles. And I'm not super worried about air bubbles in here because I didn't wedge it. So sometimes when people wedge, they wedge air bubbles into their clay. And so that's one of the reasons I avoid it unless I have to do it. So when I'm going to cone it up, right? What I do is like my, a lot of times I'll reference the like chair and karate chop, right? What I mean there is like my left hand's making sort of an L shape, right? Like this, and it's locked into my body and it's at the bottom left-hand corner, right? So maybe like 7 o'clock. That's pushing this way, and then oftentimes I'll have my other hand go opposite that, and those two kind of squeeze together. I'm not cupping underneath because that's how you rip your piece off. I kind of have, again, a mountain shape like this, and then I'm just forcing them together, and you can see it rise up in my hands. I'm not pulling it up. I'm just squeezing and then following, if that makes sense. And I don't try to do that in one go because it's a lot of clay. I'll try to do it in a few goes. All right, so I get up to here. And again, that's just from squeezing together and then following it up, right? And you can see I'm using the slit from my hands to then sort of put it on the clay so it maintains lubrication state. And then, to push down, take my chair hand here. I see a lot of folks when they do the chair, their thumb's like way up here. Have your chair sort of be like a little thumb rest. I don't know if you guys can see that, right? And that lives over the top here. I push this whole thing down and to the right, like imagining I'm pushing towards the center of the earth, right? And then it'll start to line up under my thumb as I do that. I'm not like pulling it back under my thumb. The downward forward pressure will sort of set itself back up, right? Once it sets up back under like the knuckle of my thumb, that's when I switch hands and I push down towards the center of the earth, but to the left. To get the force there, I usually lock my sort of wrists together, I lift my shoulder up, and I really lean in. We'll get it out to like here, and that feels pretty good to me. The second I took off the $20 thing that I bought, everything works so much smoother. Because I'm doing a bowl, I want to sort of, and I'm trying to make it a relatively big bowl, I want to sort of center pretty low, pretty flat, and pretty wide. Because if I center really tall, I can't make my base as wide as I need it to be. There's going to be a lot of like waste clay when you're throwing a bowl this size, right? Reason being, you have to leave enough structure to where the bowl's not going to flop on itself. So like if you throw a 10-pound bowl, you're probably trimming like 5 pounds away from it. Because you need that structure so you can like mess with it and do some surface design, right? This feels pretty good to me. So I'll then trace in from the outside corner, make that little like sort of doorknobby thing. Keep pushing past that. That doorknobby thing will give way to a divot. Where that divot is the very center, right? Now this is a little big for me to do the like finger gun smash it down trick. So what I do is I make this sort of like kung fu grip going on here, and then I dive in slowly. Try not to rush this process. The more clay you have, the slower all this stuff has to go. So just bear that in mind. And I don't want to go super deep because this is going to be a bowl. I know I'm going to want to trim it. And usually if I'm doing like a centerpiece bowl, I do want to have like a pretty well-trimmed foot and footwell in there. So I might even leave more space than I usually would, right? This was a like cereal bowl. I could kind of care less if what the footwell looks like, how deep it is, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be extravagant. But on something that's going to be like the main thing on a table, a lot of times I think of these as like pine cone bowls. It's like if you look at any like in style thing, there's always like a beautiful coffee table with a nice bowl full of pine cones or full of like random like sparkly orbs. That's what I'm making. The sparkly orb Joanna Gaines BS bowl, right? So now because I forced clay back into the middle there, I'm going to compress the hell out of it. Just because I really want to make sure I don't get a crack there. So a couple ribs I recommend you get if you're going to want to throw like bigger bowls is some kind of bowl rib, right? This is a bowl rib, this is a bowl rib. They're just round everywhere, right? Whereas most of these are kind of round with a corner, you know what I mean? Corner's not super helpful. But something that's round like this will be really good for compressing.
How much pressure are you actually putting?
Enough to kind of scrape a little bit off the surface potentially, but not so much that I gouge through. So you have to be like moving clay, but you don't want to be removing clay, if that makes sense. Now that I'm here, so the point we're going to try to do the whole time is maintaining a nice, smooth, sort of parabolic curve to the inside of this vessel, which is easier said than done, right? So if we're throwing a bowl, we really have to try to throw the cylinder and then slowly but surely turn it into a bowl, right? If I shoot for a bowl from the get-go, I'm going to get weird plate that flies, okay? So I'm going to get this going, maybe like a medium speed, you know what I mean? Not too fast, not too slow. This is probably the slowest I would ever go for stuff. Again, the slower you work, the slower your sort of hand movements have to be. And sometimes your like human brain isn't good at like doing things very, very, very slowly and consistently. So what I'm going to do is similar to how we were doing things the other day when we're pulling. I'm going to try to pull this up into a little bit of a, oh, I just threw off my bat. Hold on. A little bit of a conical shape, right? That way when I'm pulling, it's not going to immediately want to flare out. The only difference between throwing like a tall cylinder and throwing a bowl, with a cylinder, these hands, I like to think of them as like a claw machine. They really claw in like this. With a bowl, this hand is swooping the whole time, right? So this hand's almost like you're petting a cat or something, and then this hand's like they're pulling the clay up. Over here, I'm going to pet the cat. And then with my right hand, I'm kind of squeezing and rising up as I go. Like so. And then I am going to spend some time compressing the lip a little bit, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of just like grabbing onto the clay. This is just like a bigger version of this. You know what I mean? Like you would do on a cup. How you do these sort of movements isn't important. It's just important that you do some semblance of a movement like that, right? This might actually be a little slow for me. I will slow down. The higher and bigger I get, the slower I'll go. Because otherwise things are going to like real fast. All right, we're here. We're going to swoop from the very middle to the outside edge. Squeeze in here. A little bit of height. And I'm going to leave my lip pretty thick. What I'm trying to do is not really thin this out too much. Because as I go from like here to here to here to here, it's going to get thinner and thinner the whole time. And from here, it's just kind of a rinse and repeat, right? Trying to get some clay out of the bottom, but I don't want to move all of the clay from the bottom because I need that structure there. So if I kept pushing this in and pushing this in and pushing this in, the base would get really narrow, and then as I got wider, there wouldn't be enough structure to support that shape, right? And I'm also not throwing the walls of this super, super thin because I need structure, especially if I'm going to do like surface design on it, which I'm going to try to do, right? over here. Again, I'm pulling up, I'm pulling out just a little bit. And again, like this doesn't seem like a gigantic bowl, right? Like with 10 pounds, like it's even, much like we were talking about the tall forms you really notice when they shrink or whatever, right? Like sometimes a 10-pound bowl, I'm like, dude, I could have done this out of 6 pounds. But I had to leave more structure because it was 10 pounds. So oftentimes for a particular size, there's like a sort of sweet spot, a sort of Goldilocks zone, where I can get the same shape without having to leave as much clay down there for structure. So for a lot of bowls, for me, it's like 6 to 8 pounds. I can throw the same size bowl as a 10-pound bowl because I don't need the structure there. Does that make sense? So that's one of the reasons I kind of wanted you guys to do the like, throw a bowl at 5 pounds, throw a bowl at 4 pounds, throw a bowl at 3 pounds, yada, 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 is more often than not, you're going to start with 5, and then you're going to do your 4-pound bowl. It's going to be the same size as your 5-pound bowl. And then you're going to do your 3-pound bowl, and it's going to be barely smaller than the 4-pound bowl. And it's kind of confusing, but it sort of just shows you at smaller, more manageable sizes of clay how much height and stuff you can actually get out of it, right? So I'm going to do this a couple more times. Trying to get a little bit more height before I get too wide. We're already getting pretty wide. I might slow this down a little bit. And from here, what I'm going to try to do is use my bowl ribs and sort of work my way down the surface, right? Trying to widen this little bit by little bit. Using much more pressure as I get towards the bottom because I have structure there. Whereas up the top, I don't have any structure supporting anything here, right? Once I get sort of closer to this bottom corner, I will use a lot of force. Just because I want this to maintain like a really smooth, round shape. And with bowls, really I don't care what the outside looks like. I'm kind of just throwing the inside because I'm going to trim the outside anyways. So the final shape isn't going to look anything like it does right now. So from here, I got to decide what I want the profile to be. Right now we're kind of in that mixing bowl sort of zone, you know what I mean? Which honestly is a much more useful bowl than what I'm about to make. Like really, if I was making bowls for my house, I would just make a bazillion of these because they're way nicer to use. But because I want to make like a fancy pine cone bowl, you know what I mean? It's got to be wider, it's got to have a lip, and it's got to be twice as much money. So another thing I wanted to show you, a way you can get width once you start, when you're sort of in fear of, oh my gosh, I've overworked my piece a little bit. I don't really need to do this right now, but I want to show you guys how to do it. Oftentimes I will throw or sort of widen between 2 ribs, right? The less water I can use at this point, the better, because I don't want my clay to get soft. So I'm going to get this going kind of a medium speed. And I don't love this one for my inside hand. I do like this one because I can put one of my fingers through and use my other finger to sort of back it up. Does that make sense? Like that. So when I'm throwing these, if I do want to get it wider at this point, oftentimes I'll use 2 ribs. Can be like a rubber rib, can be a wooden rib, doesn't really matter. Pick my speed carefully. And from here, I am going to start from the middle. And I'm not really pulling, I'm just kind of widening out slowly as I go up. And like little movements, you know what I mean? But I'm just being very careful because like at this point, I don't want to have to replant 10 pounds, right? I then am going to go back in and sort of round everything out just because this is a slightly different shape than this and I like this shape better. So again, just trying to make like kind of a smooth dealio on the inside, you know what I mean? Where you do the thing where I like stare intently. I was rewatching the video of last week and in the middle of a pool, I'll always stop talking. I'll be like, and this is how you get it to the top. It's really interesting. So if you watch them, feel free to laugh at me on that. Because I was like, whoa, weird. Last little things I'm going to do on the inside here. I'm going to use a red rubber rib to sort of clean things up. Just a little bit. It's kind of your softer version of that bowl rib. And then the center can be kind of tricky. So take your time there. I don't think I'm going to try to get too much more width out of this because this is usually the point where I overdo it and then I regret it, right? So I think that's probably good for width, but I am going to cut what I call like cutting the lip so that you can get sort of a structure point there. Like you see a bowl that goes out like this and then has a flange. I'm going to give it that flange. So that's how you make a pine cone bowl. You give it like one of them. Does it make it more useful? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? But it looks nice. It looks fancy. So to do that, I'm going to get my left hand really saturated because I'm going to put it behind my bowl here, right? Then what I'm going to do is instead of trying to fold over, I'm going to drop down from the top and sort of split the rim to make that flange. So this is going to live here. Top's going to go down. Slowly but surely. Sort of split the rim. So I'm compressing underneath where I'm sort of pushing down with my thumb there, which is going to alter the shape of the outside. Again, when I'm doing that, when I'm throwing a bowl, I'm not throwing the outside, I'm really throwing the inside, right? So I'm just going to round this out. And then I oftentimes will take like one more pass at that curve just because I have really abruptly changed the outside shape, which I could change back if I want to. Because that's a little bit egregious of a sort of curve there. I might widen that out just a smidge. And in doing that, I'm giving it a little bit of a wobble. So now I'm going to go back underneath. Again, wet hand. Try to reset that lip. So it's not. And a wobbly flange doesn't bother me too much, because if a thing is wobbly upwards, it's really easy to notice. Once you start to go diagonal like that, you can barely tell. So I might call it here. I think we're pretty close. I might do just like a smidge of cleanup, and then we're going to call it there. Now I'm going to blowtorch it. We actually might leave this out for a little bit. I want you guys to have some time to work. We're going to do some decorating while it's on the... That was a weird way I said that. We're going to do some decorating while it's on the wheel, but I do want it to firm up a little bit, so I'm going to stand up here with a blowtorch for a while, and then I'll call everybody back, okay? Sound good? All right. I release you. So I just want it to be firmer than it would be, right? The firmer it is, the more sort of safety I have in doing any more stretching or any more shaping, you know what I mean? Like I've got a teeny bit of like a wobble, like not enough to where you're ever going to notice when it's on a table, you know what I mean? When it's full of wonderful pine cones. So I am going to try to give myself a little bit of a flange because I'm stupid and my brain wants me to. It doesn't need it because it's already a pretty wide bowl. But again, a flange makes things look fancy. It doesn't have to be huge. Just has to be like kind of noticeable. Definitely. Yeah. And from here, I might like stop messing with it because this seems like the time to stop messing with it. That wasn't the important part of the second half of the demo. What I wanted to teach you guys how to use was flocculated slip. We barely need. Oh, never mind. Come up. So this is flocculated slip. Flocculation is a process of. The simple way to put that would be like taking a wet thing and making it thicker without losing water, right? So I added Epsom salt, an Epsom salt solution to this, and it changes the chemistry so that it makes all the water molecules kind of and like bind together, right? And so what's usually really watery slip will drip much slower, right? So with a flocculated slip, we have much more control over like surface tension and therefore like textural qualities.
Is this a different kind of clay or the same?
This is, I'm using a different clay than you. This is Phoenix just because I'm going to fire this cone 10.
No, I mean this.
This, yeah, so this is the poor man's porcelain.
Oh, okay.
But it's poor man's porcelain that I specifically made up and added a flocculate solution to so that we could do some interesting things, right? So oftentimes I'll just start with a sort of baseline like this. And then from here you can kind of think about like what kind of decorations you want. Theoretically, you could just like throw spirals in it or something like that. You know what I mean? But the point of it is to sort of play around. You could also, what should we do? This one we do, I'm gonna put more slip on. That'll make it easier to see. And oftentimes I do just like, and we're done. No. And I'm gonna use a rib to sort of move the slip around. But if you want like textural bits, this can be really helpful for that. This is not a great looking version of it, but from here I can then clean some bits up and get a couple different sort of designs going on. Like I can have kind of a spiral that goes into this sort of streaky bit here. And so that's there. The middle's got kind of a spiral. Maybe we have sort of just a clean edge up here. And like point being, glaze will look different on this because this is sort of an off-white, especially for yours, it's like an off-white clay, and then the porcelain's gonna come out bright white, right? So like even if I just dip this in one glaze, anywhere where there's slip design, it's gonna look brighter and different. So it's an easy way to add sort of texture and elements like that to your piece without having to do a ton of work to it, right? Like something like that, and then I'm not gonna move it because I do want it to have a little bit of like structural difference and like it's also texture, it's not just design, you know what I mean? Where it raises up where the slip is thicker, you know what I mean? That's it. Pretty simple, but I just wanted to show you that's there if you guys want to use it. Cool.